So in this lab, the question that we will be asking ourselves is how does light, and by light we mean electromagnetic radiation, how do all of those different types of radiation affect molecules? So an example I have for you to think about how radiation can affect molecules is, for example, we have the sun, right? The sun is giving off specifically UV radiation. And by radiation, you shouldn't think like, at least now that you have taken chemistry, radiation does not just mean like chemotherapy type radiation or X-ray radiation, or just, I think people associate like bad connotations with the word radiation, but electromagnetic radiation just means any type of light. Um, there can be like visible light. We can look at like UV radiation. We have radio waves, microwaves. These are all different types of radiation, and it just depends like on how much energy it has. But anyway, UV radiation is what's coming from the sun, right? Whenever that UV radiation hits your cells, so it penetrates all the way into your cells, all the way into the nucleus of the cells, and then hits DNA, it's going to cause something called thymine dimers. And basically, at this point, your DNA is damaged. And this can cause cancer and, basically wreaks a lot of havoc in your cells. So, why is that the case? Why specifically UV radiation can do this to your cells, and versus microwave radiation doesn't do anything? It's like harmless. Or radio waves, they're also harmless. Again, cell phone waves, anything like that doesn't harm us. So in this lab, I hope that you will begin to answer some of those questions, and hopefully you see it in your everyday life. Our objectives are to examine and describe how certain molecules interact with different lights of different energies, so different electromagnetic radiations. We're going to identify certain characteristics of certain molecules that are associated and how they interact with light from there. And then you guys will construct a set of guidelines and apply these guidelines to predict reactivity for any type of small molecule that has similar molecular characteristics as the ones that you were working with. So just to give you an overall idea of how the procedure is going to work, you're going to explore the simulation, just click around, figure it out, and obviously I'm going to give you a little preview on the video on the next slide, but just explore it, just see what you can control in this simulation. It's not as much as some previous simulations you've done or labs, but there are a few just controls you need to figure out. After that, you can start off with one of the types of radiation, and then you can start off with the first molecule on your list. So for example, you can start off with microwaves and carbon monoxide. You're going to increase the amount of photons and then until you reach the max, and then you observe if and what happens to that molecule, because sometimes nothing will happen, and that's okay. And then for other ones, something can happen. You're going to continue the same process with every type of energy and with every molecule on the list, and then you will record observations, and then there's some questions after that in the applied exercises. So once you open up the simulation, you're going to see here the different types of energy, and then here is the list of molecules. So here I'm starting off with a microwave, and the first one on the list, which is carbon monoxide, and then here is the little switch to increase the amount of photons coming out from our little machine. And then you're just going to see what happens to each molecule. So here I'm increasing it. Just keep increasing it until you get to the max, and then you can move, after you record your observations, you can move on to the next molecule. And I was just doing the same thing. Then once you're done with that list for your first energy, you can move on to the next energy and start the list all over again. Just do the same exact process. and keep increasing it. And also notice you can pause it if you need to. You can also pull up this little light spectrum. It's just that same spectrum I had on the previous slide. It shows you the relationships between like frequency and wavelength. And then you keep going and just continue down the list. You can also just reset the entire simulation if you want to. Oh, and another feature that is like in here is that for some molecules, and I'm kind of giving it away, the molecule will be broken apart. So it's gonna like fly away and you can press return molecule and it'll reset it. So for data collection, I briefly went over this, but you are gonna provide a brief summary of how the simulation works, and then you're gonna fill out the observation table. After this, you're gonna answer your applied exercises, and your applied exercises is essentially where you start drawing conclusions, right? So we collect our data and then we start, making interpretations, drawing conclusions from what we observed. So first you're going to rank the radiation type. So by rank I mean from lowest to highest in terms of first their energy, well, I don't know what order, but their energy, frequency, and wavelength. You can use that little chart, the little light spectrum chart. That'll help you understand how you need to rank those. Next, you're going to discuss what molecules weren't affected, and you will also relate this to our atmosphere. So a lot of the molecules that are on that list are gases that happen to be in our atmosphere. So I'm going to let you kind of make some interpretations right there. For the next part, you will summarize effects on the molecules in a small little table. Next, you're going to discuss characteristics on that you think affect how light affects molecules. So you're going to look at the different molecules, think, okay, what's similar, what's different between these, why were these affected in this way, why were these not affected in this way. And then finally, you're going to draw some Lewis structures for the molecules that were affected by each type of radiation. From there, that's where I want you to establish just a very easy general rule of activity. So something like the UV radiation is very high energy, so it impacts XYZ molecules. Just a simple sentence or two, and that's about it for this lab.